What's your name?
Oh, my name is Gerald Bibbee. That's a Bibbee family moved in here about 1922, around that time. I think I was about 5, maybe 6 years old. Don't remember a great lot about moving in. And I've lived here ever since. Went to school down here at Coolville. And I have a picture of the old schoolhouse in that little red book right there. Someplace, I don't know exactly where.
Maybe we'll shoot all the pictures out.
And it was quite interesting. I was a hillbilly boy. Grew up out in the country. I was the kind of a kid that was so scared and so afraid of people that when I was with my dad, I would get a hold of his leg and look around him. I can remember doing that so many times, and that indicates that you're pretty self-conscious. Well, started out, I was really a hillbilly. I was born in a log cabin down in Meigs County. Log cabin was about this big across. It was just a little thing. I suppose the rooms in it, the downstairs would be just about the size of all of this. And it had an upstairs where they slept. But I don't remember, of course, being born there, and we moved right away. I don't remember anything about the log cabin, other than it was just torn down about, 4 or 5 years ago. So, but I probably got a picture of it someplace. I looked through the book and it wasn't there. But I got one someplace. So we moved to Coolville, and I started at school. I want to tell you how backward I really was, in addition to what I've already said. The old schoolhouse picture is in there. You can look at it. And I was in the room downstairs, and as you look at it on the right hand, I was right by the window. I had seats, long seats like this. About 4 or 5 could sit on one bench, and your desk was in front of you. Well, I wouldn't sit down. I was scared to death. I stayed over by the door. I had an older brother, and he was over in the other room. He was ahead of me. I didn't know what to do. But the teacher was pretty wise. After I stood there for several hours, she moved a chair over there. And I, like a big dummy, sit down in it. And the next morning, I was standing up there again, and back come my chair. Well, after a couple or 3 days, she moved that chair back. And so happened it moved it right back beside of a boy that I went to school with all through school, clear up to graduating from high school. One morning I went, there wasn't any chair. But I'd been sitting beside this kid that I learned to like and play with at recess. I sit down. And things got better as time went on. But I was so backward, I spent 2 years in the first grade. Didn't think I'd ever amount to anything, but I went on to school and graduated from Ohio University. Kind of got lucky, didn't I? You got any more questions you'd like to throw at me?
Yeah.
Favorite sport?
Yeah.
I got about 3 or 4 or 5. I love track. I used to coach down here at Coolville. I think about that, I had a real good team in 1948. Now that's some time ago. And I had I coached basketball, baseball, track. So you see what my interest in sports are. But I learned to like football. In fact, I know who won the national championship in football on the college level this year. Do you?
Ohio State Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes, that's right. Who'd they beat?
Miami.
Right on the nose. They beat Miami, and they had to be pretty good to beat Miami. But Ohio State didn't lose any games all year. So that's one of my main sports right there now is football. And in track, I like pole vaulting. I started out in track, pole vaulting, and come down with appendicitis. That stopped my pole vaulting. I wasn't very good at it anyhow, so I guess maybe that was luck. So I took up the half mile. That's what they call the 800 meters today, isn't it? 800 meters instead of the half mile. Half mile was 880 yards. I won second place at the state. And I thought that was pretty good. You win second place at the state. So that was my favorite track. Oh, I love hurdles and all that. And I like to watch track meets, good track meets. Now, anything else you'd like to know?
What's your favorite kind of food?
Food? Let me tell you, go back a long time ago. Long time ago. My mama died when she was 11, when I was 11. That was in 1928. And after she passed away, after 2 or 3 years, I had to take over the cooking. And I cooked, did all the cooking, preparing all the meals, saw that the dish was washed, see that the fire was built, and what kind of a fire do we have? There was no electricity. Electricity hadn't come to Coolville yet. You go to the store at night, they'd light a lamp or a lantern. You know what a lantern is? You carry it down here and take you back to what you wanted to buy. If you wanted to buy a pair of shoes, they took you back and set that lantern down and fits you a pair of shoes. And everything you'd buy come in what I call the bulk. It'd come in a big barrel or a big sack. If you wanted peanut butter, we always had a little bucket, about this big around, the lid on it. They'd dip that so much peanut butter in that and weigh it. Crackers, oyster crackers, had them in a big barrel, dip you out the oyster crackers. Well, that's what you got there, because now the way we lived, we didn't have any money. Depression was coming on just about the time my mother died. It was starting to brew right then, because the stock market, banks closed in '29. And the Depression hit right after that. And you don't know what the Depression is other than the word. You can't feel it, hear it, touch it. But I lived through it and did all the cooking, all of it. Our main food for the year was taters. Most of the old farmers around here called them taters instead of potatoes. And you would make a barrel of kraut. I mean a whole barrel of kraut. You take green beans and pickle them. You ever eat any pickled beans? They're not too good, but if you don't have anything else, they'll do. And corn, you get corn on the cob, bring it up. We had a big kettle. We'd throw that in that kettle, build a fire outside, boil it, cook it. And we had 10-gallon crocks we used. We'd pickle the corn. And we always had hogs we butchered. You had to have hogs, and you had to have the lard kind. They don't raise them anymore. You don't use lard. Too much cholesterol in it. That's they say. And our hogs would weigh about twice what the hogs do today when we butchered them. We'd bring them all in and shoot them, stick them. You know what sticking a hog is? You ever see them? That blood would come out, squirt out about like that. The old Germans come over here, they saved that blood and made blood pudding. We never did. And we had pork. That pork was brined down in a barrel. And sometimes we were lucky enough that we could get it out of there and put it in fresh water, and a guy would smoke it. Hams were delicious when they were done right. And and cornbread, if I had all the cornbread that I made stacked up right on top of the other, this room wouldn't come close to holding it. Because we ate cornbread at least. Now, I'm talking about Depression days and no money. I'd go to school when I was in high school. You know, you needed money a little bit. We didn't. Didn't anybody have it? Now, there's 2 or 3 kids in Coolville here that their dads had a store or did something like that. They had a little money. We didn't. I didn't know what $1 was. And one time, to tell you how cheap things were, a guy offered to hire me to hoe corn for him for how much you think an hour? 5 cents. My dad said, "You're worth more than 5 cents to me." So I hoed corn for my dad. So that pretty near takes care of the food now, I'll tell you. We had what we called flake hominy you could buy. You ever eat any flake hominy? You could get it in the bulk. Now, of course, that was in a barrel. And you could get a big sack of it for just a nominal amount of money. It didn't cost very much. Dad got it at the mill and he could trade corn for it. You did a lot of trading back at that time. They called it barter. You would trade something for something else that somebody else had. And I know during this Depression time, I caught a skunk. You ever run across a skunk? Well, we used to trap them. And I caught a black skunk one night. And oh, you talk about, was I thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. That skunk, I looked at him, and he had a little spot of white right here, a little bit that much on the end of his tail, and I said, he's black. And that was the highest price you could get out of him. And that man, in fact, we had 2 fur buyers in Coolville. I can't remember the name. One of them's name was Wise. That was a family that was quite prominent around here, the Wise. He bought furs, and the other fellow, so I went to one of them and find out how much he'd give me for it. Dad said, just check the other one too. So I went over and I checked the other guy, and whoever gave me the most, I sold it. $4 and something. Now, $4 and something would hardly wash your clothes today. Get that skunk out of them. But $4 back at that time was worth at least 10 times that. At least 10 times that on account of inflation. So I had the same as $40 today or more. And I bought a shirt and a pair of overalls, and I had enough money left. I bought what they called a radio steel runnered sled. About this long, steel runnered, and I still had some money left. I remember that was the king of the hill, that thing was. Well, let's see, I can't think of anything more about that kind of stuff.
What's your
Well, what we usually did, my neighbor boys and I would get together and we would hike through the woods. Just run around in the woods. And if we'd find a cave, we'd search through there. We didn't go way back in. There's an old story going around that here at Coolville that there was a place down here along this hollow back of here where you could go in, and it was a tunnel that led over here. But it isn't true, but they tell about it. And we investigated that, and you couldn't get in there. And And it isn't true, because if it had built a tunnel, then it had to go through rock all the way. So I knew that couldn't be true. When we made our own toys, we'd get a log and had what they call a crosscut saw. We'd saw off pieces like that, and it'd be round, and we'd make wheels. We'd make a wagon. Of course, a wheel would break right away, you know. You'd have to do it all over again. And we made sleds. And we used minder twine to make lines. My two younger brothers had goats, and we made lines to drive like horses. And they drove those goats around. And they had a ball doing that. But the big thing was, it come to Coolville. They probably did away with it when they built the new one down there, but they had motion pictures. Silent. That was silent picture time. You probably couldn't even see one today. And they had a box built up in there where they had their picture machine. They had a great big screen that was just as probably, well, bigger than that wall there, a little taller. A screen that they pulled up on the stage, and they'd shoot that on there. And my favorite one was Tarzan. Oh, Tarzan, I'm telling you, Tarzan and the apes. He'd fight apes, and he had to wrestle with the lions, and it was quite something. And it was a little serial thing that ran for a little while. Now, in addition to that motion picture that was silent, they had a band that sit right in front of the gym down there. And this band would play. They had drummers, and they had all local people here. And in fact, they had a band in the town that played at different 4th of Julys and different times like that. And that was quite a thrill to get to go to that, and I'll tell you. Of course, it cost a dime. Depression, I didn't have it. So I had a friend. His mother got a pension from some kind of a little pension. I said, I got a dime. I'll take you. And I'd go with him. And that was quite interesting. Quite interesting. Got anything else you want to know? Well, I don't drink it anymore. I quit drinking it. You get old like I am.
No, back then.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. And today I don't drink it. But back at that time, I didn't have a favorite because I couldn't afford it. Cost a nickel. You didn't go buy pop and pay a nickel for a bottle of pop. You know why? You never had the nickel. But they had what they called Orange Crush, and a whole bunch of different kinds of pop. They didn't have it in cans. It all come in glass bottles back at that time. And I never got to taste pop. I can't remember what it even tasted like. I'm sure I got a chance to drink some once in a while, but I don't even remember it. Now, we made tea out of sassafras roots. Some of you people, you probably drank it. And then it's not bad. We'd drink that. Then they had a little plant that grew over on the hillside in certain places called pennyroyal. And we'd get that, dry it, and we'd make tea out of that. Didn't buy coffee, only when Dad would happen to run across some money of some kind, and we'd get a pound of coffee. And the way we made coffee, we didn't have percolators, and we didn't have anything that you could pour it in. And remember, there's no electric. And all my cooking was done on a wood stove with 6 holes. And it had a lid that set on each hole, 6 of them. And I had an oven. And we'd make tea and put it on there. And so my pop, I don't know much about the pop business, But I know the pop today is much more expensive than it was then. But not too expensive according to inflation. If you buy it by 12 pack or something like that, a pop, you'd get it for about, what, 18 to 20 cents a bottle. Buy it out of a machine, how much is it? 50 cents? 40? Or I don't know what it is. I never did buy any out of a machine. But you just remember now, I'm talking mainly about Depression days. That's when I grew up and remembered all these things. What else?
When's your birthday?
When is my birthday?
Yeah.
September the 17th. In fact, I'll tell you how old I am, but you'll have to figure it out. I'm going to celebrate in September my 36th anniversary of my 50th birthday. Now, you may take some time to get that figured out. It's 36th anniversary of my 50th birthday. You can, after this is over with, you can think about that. And that way you don't, women can tell that, and they're not telling how old they are. You don't ask women how old they are, or girls. Now, girls that's 12 wants to be 16, of course, don't they? Yeah. Huh?
Not really.
Not really. I'm kidding, of course. And all the boys, all they care about is to be old enough to drive a car. Yeah, that's what you think about. I drove my first car when I was 28. 28. And I bought my first car that I owned in 1947. So that was a long time before I ever owned a car.
How long did it last?
6 years. Studebaker Champion. They don't make them anymore. But some of the nice cars back at that time were DeSotas, and I can't think about some more of them now. The Packard was a great car. Hudson Hornet. We came to Coolville. There was a covered bridge down by the mill, right under the old bridge that's down there now. And it was a 2-lane job. It was a nice bridge, covered, sides all built in, and it was built up high so that the water wouldn't take it out. And of course, in the 1913 flood, it got a high. Of course, I don't remember that. I wasn't here. But in 1937, I think I have some pictures in that red book there of the 1937 flood. And it had been torn down, the old bridge had. Because a lot of stories read about it, about ghosts and that kind of thing, and of course none of that was ever true. I lived right beside of it and went through it, walked to school for, I don't know, several months, night and morning through that bridge. Dad would go to work and go through the bridge, and you could hear his horses clop-clopping as they go through that bridge. The wooden floor. The Coolville, you come to town, like I told you before, no electric. They built the new schoolhouse down here. Well, of course, they added to it. You probably don't remember when they added to it, or do you? You old people. You look like you're old. You don't remember it either. Well, anyhow, they added on to it, and they got a Delco system. They bought it from a guy that had graduated from down here, and he's now, if he's still living, he's in his 90s, maybe close to 100. Stout. You probably, Howard Stout. And there's no water in town. Everybody had a well where you had a windlass. You turn it, had a bucket on it, and you drop that down and get water. And everybody had them. Everybody had an outside toilet. Some were fancy with 3 holes inside. Some just had 2. Usually weeds and flowers, they had usually hollyhocks growing up around it. And on Halloween, the doggone ornery boys in town would upset everyone they could. Yeah, that's right. I remember one night, car come along and stopped, and I heard it stopped, and I stopped, and so I went out on the porch. I didn't have my shoes tied up, so I lost one of them. I took after them. They had upset my neighbor's toilet. She was only about my age, about 85. She had a daughter that had heart trouble and died just a year or so after that even. Well, I saw him, so I upset it. I saw it go over. I took after him. Shoe left me. I had to quit. But the neighbor saw him. So we identified him the next day at school. I was teaching school then. I got those boys outside from the study hall, and I said, "What'd you do last night?" I wanted them to lie to me. But they didn't. They said, "Well, we did it." They knew where I lived. I said, "When you going to set it up?" They said, "Would you wait till after dark so people won't see us?" I said, "If you'll set it back up like it's supposed to be, okay." They had 3 girls with them. They were just out having a good time. I wanted to talk to the girls, and I had them outside the study hall door too, and I was talking to them. They knew right away what was happening. Of course, I got tears in their eyes. They thought they were going to have to face the county sheriff. We didn't. Everything turned out all right. But Coolville had a lot of businesses in it. A lot of them. We had I can't name all of them because I can't think of them. Coolville Mill down there, the building's still standing. There was a little store down there, jot them down. A fellow by the name of Wise had that. They had the place there, the big hotel. I don't know how many rooms was in it. It was a big building sitting down there. And you come on up the street. Well, down there by the mill was a blacksmith shop. A fellow named Root. And you come on up the hill, a fellow by the name of Ed Carlton. His name's in there in his picture in my book. He lived to be up in his 90s. He made wagons and shoed horses. He shoed thousands of horses. We had a little, what we called a buggy horse, a little horse that we used in the cart and the buggy, and I worked her plowing corn. I'd bring her over and get her shod. And he said, "I'd like to have you bring her. She stands so still for you." I'd stand there, and they had flour sacks so long, and they'd cut those flour sacks, nail them on a stick, and use those to shoo the flies away. In fact, they used them in many households the same way to shoo the flies out of the house, because so many people didn't even have screen doors. You talk about flies, there's millions of them. Now, I'm not exaggerating now. You'll have to talk to some old guy. They don't know what flies are, the younger people. I bet your dad and moms don't know hardly about how many flies there were. We stopped at one man's house. They didn't have any screen door to see if one of the boys could help us do something. And when they come out that door, if I said 100 million, you probably say I was a liar, but I'll bet you there was several thousand flies come right out in front of it. Of course, they were a little bit on the dirty side, of course, naturally. They didn't try to get them out. We had screen doors, but every time a kid goes in and out of a screen door, 10 flies in, and never one comes out. So, Cool Village had a lot of things. We had a printery. We had a pharmacy. Pharmacy was right over here where where they have the
Larry's Pizza.
pizza place. That was a pharmacy. We had a funeral home. Never had funerals in the funeral home at that time. They had them in churches altogether. And we had White Store. We had 2 restaurants down there, and we had a barber shop. We had a harness shop in this area here someplace. We had a place that collect cream. People bring their cream and bring it in and sell it, and use the money, of course, to buy sugar and salt and pepper that they couldn't scrape up any place, you know. But you could just go on and name more. There's one man in town that's rather interesting. His name was Weigel. He butchered. And he had a horse and a small wagon. We called them spring wagon. They were a little light wagon. They wouldn't haul maybe 500 pound or maybe 800. And he had a box on that. And he put his meat in that. He'd butcher ever so often. And he'd deliver that around town. He had a little bell he'd ring. I got the bell. He'd ring that bell. And if you wanted some meat, you'd come out and he would weigh you up so much meat, he'd cut it off. Had a little scales there. I know one time we had a little old Jersey bull that was mean as all get out. We lived right down here close. Dad called him and said, would you like to have him to butcher? He come down and looked at him and said, yeah, I'll take him. I'll be down tomorrow and get him. So the next day he came down, brought his wagon. We went out, he was out in the field, the bull was. He was mean. He was just young, but he was mean. He was standing over there under a willow tree, and one of the limbs come out like this. He said, man, that would be a good place to just get rid of him. We got that limb right there. Well, let's butcher him right there. So he just pulled out his rifle and come up and shot him, and down he went and stuck him. Pulled him up there and skinned him right there on the spot. Put the meat in his wagon, took it home, and cut it up. Partly put it in his wagon. And I don't know whether or not I got it for sure, but I got the table too that he cut his meat on. Now that was back in the 20s. That was when that happened, in the 20s. That bull was so mean. And I had a cousin that lived in town. He'd come down and get milk at our farm. That doggone bull put him up a tree. Up a tree he went. He didn't come home. His dad come after him. He got down to the fence, and there was that bull there standing there pawing the ground, bellowing. So the dad went down along the fence and coaxed the bull down, got him up on the other side a little way, and he yelled over and said, Bernard, get on to the house. I got him over here. So he went to the house. And that's what caused the bull to go by the wayside. Now, if you got anything else or anybody else got anything that you want to ask.
Did you have any animals?
We have animals?
Yeah.
Nothing but horses and cows. And those 2 goats that the boys drove around all the time. We had a few chickens. You had to have a few chickens. You know how we got the little bitties, the little ones? We set an old hen. An old hen will go setting every so often. And when she wants to sit, she'll just sit on that nest. We'd buy some eggs from another man that had real good chickens. And we'd put about 12 eggs under her, and she'd raise those chickens. When they all hatched, we'd take her out, put her in a little coop, tie her leg by a string or something, and we'd feed them and water them, and she'd take care of those chickens. When they got a little bigger, we'd just turn her loose. But there's hawks back at that time, too. Now those chickens would mind that old hen when some of the boys and girls today won't mind their dad and mom. You probably know some that does as they please. When that old hen would see a hawk flying over, she'd let out a special squall, a special noise. Those chickens would get under her wings or under with dock, we called it dock, big thick leaf stuff that you can't eat, or they'd go right under there. You wouldn't see a chick anyplace. And when that hawk left, I don't know how she told them, she'd shake herself and they'd all get out and go about their business. We had a little horse that lived to be 32 years old. I took the first ride I ever took that I can remember when I was about 5 years old with my grandfather. He had a big mustache. He was an old man then. He took me down the road, going someplace. I don't remember where we were going, but I was thrilled to death. My grandfather looked out over the hill over there, and coming down that hill was a Model T Ford. So what my grandfather knew that horse wouldn't stand still for that Ford because it made too much racket. And she could hear her ears come up like this. He took her right out through this meadow, out there to a big tree. He said, you go over and stand right beside that tree. And he got up there and took her by the bits and held her head around where she couldn't see it till that car went past. Now that's how few cars there was at the time. The horse was scared to death of them. When we moved to Coolville, we brought her, she went on the mail route. We had 3 mail carriers out of Coolville. And these 3 mail carriers had horses. They all had horses to run on the mail route, but every once in a while one would get lame or something would happen, they'd want a horse. And we had the best horse in the country. So we'd rent the horse to them. And they just thought the world of her. She knew exactly after the first few trips just where to stop. She'd come right up and stop where they reach into the mailbox. But she was a real good horse. We had to have her destroyed. Put down, they call it. She couldn't eat. Her teeth were gone. Was feeding her the best horse feed we could feed her. We loved her. When that old horse was taken away, we all cried. In fact, she brought us the only money in that we had during that time. Only real money. I suppose we got 50, 75 cents a day out of the use of that horse. I can't remember, it might have been more than that, but I doubt it. But everybody had horses. This town was full of horses. There was at least 2 livery stables. One of them was down there right beside the school, on where Roberta Cursell lives. That would be as you face the school, would be on the right. You can look over, you can see there's still buildings, partly still there. And there was another 2 of them around over on 4th Street, on 3rd Street, livery stables. We had a man in town that ran a hack to the Coolville station. And I got one of those little, what do they call them? Like you give it, we used to give at school, a token, a little token that he used. His name was P.O. Smith. And he ran that back and forth. People would come down on a train and come to town. They go someplace, they'd go by train if it's going any distance. Yeah. They had camp meeting over there. You know where the campground is, some of you? Well, they still have camp meeting, but back at that time, that camp meeting was big. Now, down where the ball diamond was, on the river bottom, you know where that is? There was a road that went around back of that, clear around a big circle. come through the wood bridge, made a left, and went right around a big circle. Went up on that campground. The brick is still over there at the campground right now. You can see it as you go up to it. And they would feed you over there. They had a great long table. I can't tell you, I'll bet you that table was 50, maybe 100 feet long. And the reason I can remember about this, I had an old man in Athens when I worked up there. I used to work at the Spot Restaurant. You probably don't remember that either, but it was an old restaurant there in town. Right straight diagonally across the street from the main entrance to the campus. Now my mind completely left me. Oh, the old fella come in one time, and I suppose I called him old. He wasn't old according to my age. He was about 70. And he says, you know, I was down at the camp meeting a time or two. We went down on an excursion train. They run an excursion from Athens down. And he says they had roasting ears, that's corn on the cob, but no one knew how to eat it in public. He says, I didn't. He says there was a platter there, and it had stacked up like this. Steam was coming off from it. He says, I was dying to get one of those. There's a homemade butter. I'm not talking about this creamery butter that's white. I'm talking about homemade yellow butter. Sitting right beside of each one of them. He said, I got to the place that I was going to take a chance. So I took my fork and reached over and got one of them, put it on my plate, got me some butter and never looked up. I put that butter on that corn, said I just bent over and started eating it. Never looked up. Said pretty soon I looked out of the corner of my eye like that, everybody was getting an ear of corn. That would have been funny, wouldn't it? Kind of, but they don't do that like that anymore. It used to be a big thing. I had people tell me that the wagons and buggies from the old covered bridge right clear around back of that, up that campground hill was solid, waiting to get up there. Now, if there's anything else that you'd like to know, I can't think of anything. I'd like to be reminded.
If you could go back in time, what would you change?
What's that?
If you could go back in time, what would you change?
Well, what do you hear people say? The good old days, they weren't. There wasn't any good old days. Things went slow because you couldn't go any faster than a horse. You knew your neighbors. But if there was anything I'd like to change, would be today. Not go back from electric, not go back from your water, not go back from good schools, but morality. That is a word that hits my mind all the time. You see people do things that are absolutely wrong. I don't know how they can do them and satisfy their own conscience. And I could name over several things, but I'm not going to go into that. It would be a long story. But our morality today is terrible. And I'd like to see people like you, young people, grow up to be decent citizens. Don't smoke. You think I used to smoke?
No.
Yeah, I was dumb enough, I smoked. I smoked while I was in service. I was in World War II. I was over in Normandy beachhead the day that we landed on the beach. The government, in our rations, furnished cigarettes. And if you stop at a Red Cross place, they may have donuts, but you could always get cigarettes. They had old Goals, Sir Walter Raleigh's, Lucky Strikes, Camels, oh, I can't name, Coos. There's other ones that I can't remember just offhand. I know the name of them, but can't recall them. So I like to change things today. 2 young men come into the barber shop as I was over there and had to stop and put their cigarettes out. They couldn't have been more than high school students. You know what they told us when I took hygiene? We had hygiene, helped when I was in school. It's cigarettes stunt your growth. And I'd look around at big, strong men smoking cigarettes. It didn't stunt their growth very much. So we just took that as a grain of salt, paid no attention to it. Today, it'll kill you. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Talk to any doctor. I've lived a long time, and I've seen people die from smoking cigarettes. One of my best friends, or several of my best friends. I got several friends. 7 Flood, down at the mill.
Thank you.
Well, there's Linus.
Hi, that's me. Is that Ed Garland?
Yeah, that's it.
That's what I thought.
You probably got pictures of him too, haven't you?
I don't figure, I don't. Same class with them, but sometimes they were in my class and sometimes,
Was it?
no.
No?
It's just this down this building down
Oh,
on
right.
the other floor.
Okay.
Oh, I thought he said down with the old mill,
Yeah,
down there,
there's a hotel
there's
there.
a blacksmith shop. It was really about how many, were there a lot of people or what just?
Oh, there's
around?
about 500 to 600 people.
Oh, okay.
But before that, there was, clear down at the foot of the hill, there was a great big store building there.
People used to have a lot of fun just being with each other, you know.
Behind.
I did.